Here is one of a series of talks by spiritual leader Lola McDowell Lee, spanning 2 decades from the early 70s through the 90s. Lola was a Zen Roshi, whose Rinzai lineage included Dr. Henry Plutov and renowned Zen master Shigetsu Sasaki. Lola was a religious scholar as well as an ordained Christian minister. While the talks are focused mainly on Zen and Buddhism, Lola drew on many spiritual traditions, including those of Jesus, Plato, Lao Tzu, the Hindu Vedas, Meister Eckhart, and Gurdjieff.
In the Orient, in China and Japan, when a teacher gives a talk of some kind, a lecture, discourse, teisho, they have a chair that they sit on, and the chair is very elevated, so they're sitting above. You know, the monks are sitting on the floor, and they sit up. So they call it a high seat. It's interesting. They sit up there with their little, so it's thick with a thing whisk on the end, so they keep the flies away. Because everything is open, you see, in the monastery. Anyway, ascending to the high seat. See, so he goes up to give a talk. This Dogen Zenji said, Zen master Hogen studied with Keishin Zenji. And once Keishin Zenji asked him, Joseph, where do you go? And this Hogen replied, I am making pilgrimage aimlessly. Keishin then asked him, what is the matter of your pilgrimage? And Hogen answered, I don't know. So Keishin Zenji then said, not knowing is most intimate. And Hogen suddenly attained great enlightenment. Boy, they sure do it neat in stories, huh? Little word, and they are there, you know. But this not knowing is most intimate. Very puzzling thing, isn't it? That you are very intimate with the not knowing. Of course, and you must remember what kind of a not knowing that is. Anyway, Dogen Zenji was the founder of the Soto Zen sect in Japan. And he's born around 1200 in Kyoto. And at this time, Buddhism had been in Japan for about 600 years. It was brought over from Korea. Now, in the social scheme of things in Japan at that time, values were shifting, as they very often do. Our values in our society are shifting now also. And they don't really stay still very long at any time. But anyway, values were shifting. The values in Japan up until that time had been on the refinement of things, the delicacy of things. People living in court, you know, in the king's, the emperor's court and everything. They wanted everything very refined and very cultured, you know. And Dogen's parents were of this aristocratic class. But anyway, at this time, the values were shifting, and the emphasis now was on strength and discipline. So the samurai came about. And, you know, they came about mostly in the Kamakura area. And it seemed like for a while there was a lot of confusion, and religion sort of had gone to pot in a way. Not that kind of pot, but in that kind of pot. Magic prayers were being sold to the wealthy, and at the same time, the major monasteries had armed monks, had these samurai, armed monks, who engaged actually in combat. And they served under the emperor, and they had these little skirmishes around and about. And it was called the age of the decline of the Dharma, because the practice had strayed so far from the teachings of the Gautama Shakyamuni, who was called the Buddha. And there arose at this time more strongly the belief in Amitabha, who was the savior Buddha. I mean, they do have still Amitabha, who is, they consider about in the same sense as we consider Jesus. He's the savior. The Christians consider Jesus. So here's Amitabha is the savior Buddha, and he is the one who promised to lead the people to the heavenly Pure Land. And all of this was spreading so that the people were doing lots of, what's the old chant? Amitabha, Nembetsu, Amitabha, Nembetsu, Amitabha. Anyway, so that they could go to the Pure Land. And the reciting of his name, Amitabha, was taught as the easiest way to get to the Pure Land. Just repeat his name. And Dogen, being brought up in this era, he had lost his parents by the time he was 8. And when he was 13, he went to a monastery at Mount Hiei. And the following year after that, he was there and worked for a year, studied for a year, whatever you want to call it. And he was ordained by the head of the Tendai sect, which was at Mount Hiei. Still is, I guess. Now, this Dogen Zenji, he lived with a question. And it was a very compelling question for him. Some people, you know, they do live with this question, and it varies to some extent. But it is almost as if that question drives them into seeking. I mean, it could be, you know, who am I? Or, you know. But his question was that both the exoteric and the esoteric teachings explain that a person in essence has the Dharma nature and is originally the body of the Buddha nature. I mean, we are already all of this that we are seeking. If this is so, why do all the Buddhas in the past, in the present, and in the future arouse the wish for and seek enlightenment? Why do people brought up in the Western world, so we are Christians rather than Buddhists, we have the everlasting light, that lighteth every man that cometh into this world. Why do they seek that light? Some of them do, you know. Why do people seek that light? If we are already that, why seek? And there are people in this world who put forth a great deal of effort to this question. You know, almost a life's work. They spend literally their lives looking to find out what or who they are. Why does anybody seek enlightenment? Well, Dogen couldn't find a suitable answer. So he went to another monastery, another Tendai monastery, and asked the abbot there. And this man would not give him an answer. But he suggested, this abbot did, that Dogen go to China. He make a trip to China and find out. Now this abbot, Isai Zenji, had been to China, and he had been introduced to the then extant 5 schools of Zen. And then he made a second visit, and on the second visit he had met Rinzai. And in the Rinzai, or as it is called in China, the Lin Chi school, see, it is this tradition that carries on this vigorous, sometimes dialogue between the teacher and the student. Yeah. And it was at that time the most prominent Zen school in China. And so this Isai Zenji brought this teaching to Japan about 1190. Yeah. But because he had been in the Tendai thing, and still was to some extent, the authorities thereof, the Orthodox Tendai, were very opposed to his presenting Rinzai Zen. But they would allow him to present this Zen as one of the 4 practices of Tendai. See? So he taught from the Lotus Sutra, from the Mahayana precepts, and the esoteric rituals, and then he taught Zen meditation. So that is in the Tendai thing. And this man died in 1214. But Dogen continued on with this man's successor, Myozen. And in 1223, both Myozen and Dogen went to China. And here they went around to the different monasteries of southern China, specifically southern China. And which to me is interesting because the Zen in northern China would say, somebody would come from South China and they'd say they were seeking, how can you even be bothered to look? You're from the South. You're from southern China. No good ever came out of southern China. You know. It's like about Jesus, you know. And they said, from Nazareth? Well, no good ever came out of Nazareth. How could there be a master in Nazareth? Yeah, so, in the South. And the South is considered the gradual school, and the North is considered the abrupt or the sudden school. You know, and the Rinzai, you know, was considered a northern school. You know, they have this tremendous lineage in Rinzai Zen of Obaku and Huangpo and Matsu, one of the greatest that ever was. You know. Anyway, Dogen found in this Rinzai Zen thing that the people did this koan practice. You know, they were given questions, and at that time the questions were not so many. I mean, it certainly not included all the 1,700 that they have today. But they had maybe 10, 15, something like that. They grew through the years, you know. All starting with that one, before your mother and father, what are you? You know. That's the basic one. All the rest of them grew from that. Anyway, Dogen thought that these koan ignored the meaning of the Buddhist scripture. Well, at that time, it probably did, because now it's part of the 1700, it includes, you know, things out of the Buddhist scripture. But at that time, no, it was just this, always this pointing to you as to what you are. You know. After 2 years of looking around and making up his mind that this really wasn't what he wanted, he decided to go back to Japan. And then he remembered a monk by the name of Rujing, and who was supposed to be an authentic practitioner of the way. So he went to this Tiangtong mountain in the summer of 1225, and he at the time was 62. And at this meeting, Dogen wrote about it afterwards with Rujing. He said, I first offered incense and bowed formally to my late master, old Buddha Tiangtong. See? And in his abbot's room on the first day of the 5th month of the first year of Bao Qing of the great sun, see? He also saw me for the first time. And upon this occasion, he transmitted the Dharma finger to finger, face to face, and said to me, the Dharma gate of face-to-face transmission from Buddha to Buddha, ancestor to ancestor, is realized now. See? So, he went back, he carried this back to Japan after his study with this man, and he died in Kyoto in 1253. The founder of Soto Zen in Japan, Dogen Zenji. Great man, great man. Now, the Soto Zen teaching centers around single-minded sitting meditation. Single-minded. Yeah. And which is called Shikantaza. Single-minded. You know what that is? Phew. So you set aside all your involvements and you let the 10,000 things just go. Just let them go. You just still to rest. You don't have to keep them stirred up. Meditation is not thinking of good. Meditation is not thinking of bad. Meditation is not introspection. It is engaging yourself in this single-minded meditation as if your head were on fire. And then there are some instructions as to mind training. First, learn the preliminaries. You know, in other words, you start at the beginning. Just start at the beginning. You know what the beginning is? You. So that every time you start, in a way you start at the beginning, there's you. And in a way, because of what goes on in your world of appearances, you seem to be different every time you sit down, naturally. Now, so you sit, and the mind, single mind, now, you sit, and the mind is still. Then you realize truth is. Truth is not something that you create. Truth is. It is not something far away. It is. Truth surrounds you like an ocean surrounds a fish. The fish are not aware of the water. Are you aware of what you're surrounded with? And don't tell me space, because that's not true. Space is a concept, like time is a concept. Space, what we ordinarily call space, is like we measure. We're measuring people. So the measurement between where you are and where I am, what is in between, we call space. What is really in between? What is really in between? I mean, you can take a look at your brains. And you got a right-sided brain and a left-sided brain. And it has communication, from left side to right side. What is in between? What is it? But through what does it communicate? Okay, fish are not aware of the water, and we're not aware of what we're surrounded with. Once the fish becomes aware of the water, it is immediately enlightened. The fish is born in the ocean, it lives in the ocean, and one day it disappears in the ocean. So now, in what do you live? You were born into this world, you have your existence, and then you die to this world. What we need is a kind of awareness which seems either to be missing or somehow eludes us, this awareness. It's there. Every one of you have it, this particular kind of awareness. But as you go about your ordinary business, are you aware? Are you really alert? Are you mindful? Do you know what the word mindful means? It means full of mind. Are you mindful? It doesn't mean to be full of appearances. It means to be full of mind. Yeah. Do you know how to watch? Do you know how to observe? Do you know that truth is? Can you have faith in it? Truth is. Now, then we come again to this mind, and the mind is a barrier to our enlightenment. All that keeps you from the perception of the very fundamental truth is your own mind. And it is not the mind itself, it is what is in the mind. What is the content of your mind? We have to get past the content of this mind somehow or another in order to see the mind. This content that we have to deal with. Everyday thoughts. Our dreams. Dreams of the past, remembrances of the past, dreams of the future, how things should be. And we can have long discussions with ourselves about this, how things should be. We have sometimes dreams of great ambition and dreams of great achievements, like becoming instantly enlightened. And we have dreams of small achievements. Just let me get through the day. Let me cope. Dreams and our desires. The stuff of the mind. Mind stuff, the Greeks called it. And this mind stuff, in a way, is what surrounds us, because you don't seem to be able to see anything but this mind stuff. And it blocks us just as much if we had put the China wall around us. And it is because of this mind stuff that the fish remains unaware of the water. And then we come to the other thing about the mind, which is called no mind. No mind is the door. And it is sometimes called bodhicitta, or it is called mushin, or it is called wusin, or Buddha mind. Mind in the state of no mind. That is, mind with no content. Mind without thought. Mind without a hope. Mind without dreams, and mind without desires. So they say no mind, because usually we call our thinking mind. Our thinking is called mind. I should say it that way. Yeah. But it isn't. The thinking is the activity of the mind. And when the activity isn't, we say, well, there's no mind there. But the mind with a capital M is present. It is the mind itself and not the activity thereof. And for this no mind, the mind without content, for this one strives. This is the effort. A mind which dreams no more. We spend our dreaming states, It's almost as if it were a basis for living, our dreams, And we're no longer deluded by the desires of the dreams. So that then there is this mind which is crystal clear. Crystal clear and extremely aware, very sharp. To realize this mind as it is, what it is, such as it is, And the thinking and the dreaming are just the activities of it, you know, because here we have a body, and we know the activities of the body, but the body itself, you see. And we go on diets, and here's this, we know something about the stomach, how it operates, and we know how there's some way about the muscles, how they operate, you know, in yoga. So now, can you tell me how the mind operates? And certainly it's as much a part of you as your stomach or your muscles. So you just, you know, look a little bit. And then to realize that phenomena, the appearances, phenomena are like dreams. Phenomena are like dreams. It is not that they are dreams, they are as if they were dreams. They are like, similar to. Whatever you experience is phenomena. We consider this and this and this, you know, they're objects. They're just sitting there. Fine, that's an object. That's as it appears in the mind. What this is and what this is and what that is, we don't perceive because we're just using the senses. The objects of the mind are to be treated as phenomena. And some people, the objects of the mind are also to be treated as phenomena. Your emotions are to be treated as phenomena. And some people find this very difficult. My feelings are only phenomena? Ooh, you know? Well, think about it. There are objects of this world like trees and rocks and clouds, and then there are objects of the mind. There are thoughts and dreams and hopes, and even some spiritual experiences. They're like objects. They're appearances. They're phenomena. If you have a spiritual experience and it is taking place in the psyche, it is an appearance. And it is a necessary state to go through. I'm not running it down. It is very necessary, and it is of utmost importance, you know, that they do appear. But it is the making objective of something within. You may, you know, it's like all of a sudden you're pervaded by this great light and it's just flooding through you, and oh boy, you know, that light is phenomena. You go outside and you see flowers. Roses. Fragrance is amazing. It's a phenomenon. So you go back and you sit, and all of a sudden you see the rose in the heart. You know, that's the Rosicrucians. They had this thing of the rose in the heart. That's phenomena. You perceive outside and inside. You see what's going on in here. More or less. To some extent. Almost. Yeah, something's going on out there. Something's going on in here. You see something. Immediately something's going on in here. It has to be. Yeah? See, I look out there and I look in here. Always. We are the seers. You see. You are the perceiver. When are you ever the seen? You are the experiencer. When are you ever experienced? You are the witness. When are you that which is witnessed? What or who experiences you? You know, you can go walking down the street and you can look at the people, you look at the shopkeepers and the customers coming and going, and all as if it were like a dream, like a dream. That's a very, very famous expression in Soto Zen, like a dream, like a fantasy. The houses and the buses and the trains and the cars and the airplanes, you know, like a dream. Phenomena. Maybe then, maybe, a question might occur, perhaps. If all this that I perceive all these objects are all like a dream, am I a dream also? Am I a dream? If that which is perceives what is, like a dream, an appearance on this mirror mind, then who is this I? If the object is like a dream, is the subject like a dream also? If you pay attention, if you're very now alert, questioning yourself. I mean, these are the ways you should question yourself. You will feel that something is loosening almost, as if there had been a tightness in you and it kind of loosens. And what is loosened is your idea of the ego. Now, some people call an ego function a byproduct. If one thinks that this object, whatever it is that stands there in front of you, is what it appears, then the ego can exist. The illusion, the ego lives with this illusion that whatever you see is true, instead of it being like a dream, a world appearing. The observation of phenomena, the observation of object and subject is of extreme importance. Subject and object, object and subject. These are to be worked upon over and over and over and over. What is subject and object, and what is the relation between the two? Now, if you really work with this very seriously, it can lead to another phenomenon, that of dreaming. When you sleep, you dream. Let me do that. But this is a little different kind of dreaming. In this kind of dreaming, you know that you are dreaming. You know that the dream is a dream. And if you can catch yourself at that moment, because you have been observing, so you should be able to, as this happens, the dream disappears. And for the first time, you will experience deep sleep, but you will be awake. Try this subject-object stuff. Once you have seen your dream disappear, and you remain, the quality of consciousness changes. It has like a new flavor to it. Now you begin to have an inkling of what it is to be awake. Other mornings you got up and you thought you were. The alarm goes off and you jump out of bed and you stand there, you know, and you thought, now, okay, I'm awake. But the morning after this experience of waking while you're sleeping, see, your eyes will be so clear, you know, everything will look so colorful. See, the whole world is so alive. It's crystal and clearness, huh? Even the rocks, they seem to breathe and pulsate. See, so when one is awake, you know, the whole existence changes its quality. Yeah. Transcendental consciousness, a witness that is not a me, I. So we then step into this next phase of examining the nature of the unborn consciousness, of the unborn mind. One examines the nature of awareness. You look into it, and you look very deep into it, and then you will smile. See? This unborn, this undying, has always been. It is eternal, and it's timeless. And you smile. I mean, it's about all you can do. How fearful you were of death. How fearful you were of old age. And how fearful you were of 1,001 things. And yet, it's all like a dream. And we smile. Unnecessarily fearful, unnecessarily greedy, unnecessarily selfish, unnecessarily suffering, as if we've been living in a nightmare, all because we didn't see. That is with the mind. Then comes something that's rather difficult. To let go the remedy. Don't cling to a particular method, which is the remedy. I mean, Buddha, they call Buddha the great healer. He had these remedies for our disease, all these remedies. So, when the work is done, don't cling to it. And yet we do, because this is the last ditch of the ego to survive, you know. It comes in from the back door and begins all its extra effort begins right at the beginning. All phenomena are like dreams. We start right there again, and it wants to hang on to that. And that stops any further effort to become further aware. That ego rears its head, and funny thing, at this point, that teacher gets nasty. Nasty. What's the matter with her, you know? Can't be me. I'm making such progress, you know. You want to cling. And once you start clinging, you're back in the same old rut. The ego has many disguises. You know. You hold on to anything. You cling to it, and that ego is just stomping around the fire. Something else, the ego is very dependent. We think we are very independent. You know, actually, the ego is very dependent. It needs things. See? Possess anything you possess, even a spiritual method. Upaya, which is a device for doing something, can become a possession. This is my way. Oh, yeah. Which you'll be very surprised. Psst, you are possessed by it. Yeah. Be it money, be it something, whatever it is that you possess, you will be possessed by it. And you will be so fearful of losing it. You own it. You're so fearful of losing it because it has made this turnaround and it possesses you. The ego is that dependent. When you practice, whatever it is that you practice, with any upaya, these methods, do not possess it. It is something you are practicing. Therefore, I always say, you are practicing meditation. You are practicing meditation. When you have experienced what this particular device, this particular method is supposed to produce, and you want to keep on and on and on and on with it, then you're possessing it. When it has produced what it is to produce, let it go. Now, when the experience has occurred, now you be very alert. The ego is very cunning. It will say, even after one experience, you see the light once, okay. Then the ego says, look, you are no longer an ordinary person. Of course, you don't have to experience spiritual things to say that, huh? Look what you have attained. Look, you are enlightened. One experience. You are enlightened. This is how the ego talks to you. You think you don't have conversation with something? Yeah. See, look, what I have accomplished, this is the goal of all human beings, and I am that 1 in a million. 1 in a million. You feel so good about yourself. You're holier than thou. See? You look special to yourself. Spiritual and saintly and righteous. And for the birds. Huh? The whole thing is lost. See? Through the remedy, the diseases come back. Yeah. The Buddha used to tell a story. There were 5 idiots. 5 idiots, huh? You get it. They were passing through a village. And seeing them, the villagers were surprised because they were carrying a boat on their heads. It was a big boat. And it almost crushed these 5 idiots. Yeah. You know, it was big and heavy. And there was no water around there to use a boat. The little ponds were little. The boat was bigger than the pond. You know. So people asked them, of course, what are you doing? You got the big boat, what are you doing? And panting with exertion, these idiots replied, we can't leave this boat. It is the boat that helped us to come from the other shore to this shore. How can we leave it? Because of it, we are here. Without it, we would have died on the other shore. We will never leave this boat. We are indebted to it forever. We are carrying it on our heads in sheer gratitude. So one could very well ask, how many boats are you carrying? So you let the remedy go. Be free. Now, I'm going to go back and pick up a point. This Isai abbot from the Tendai sect who advised Dogen to go to China, and that he had gone and he had studied under the great Linchi, the great Rinzai. Now Rinzai had formulated some very basic principles which are intended to lead us to enlightenment. And seeing that this is what you're going to be spending the week trying to do, this is your effort, is to wake up totally, I thought you might like to know his 4-fold principles. The relationship between the questioner and the answerer. Now, let us say that is between the ego and the self. The ego questions, it gets a true answer from truth, from the self. The four processes of liberation from subjectivity and objectivity. And these steps lead to the transformation of the limited ego self to the unlimited universal self. In other words, to the true man, to your true identity. Now, the relationship between the answerer and the questioner. Pin Chin Chu, which is the guest sees the host. The guest, of course, is the ego self. Chu is a host, and that's the universal self. As we are ordinarily, as we know ourselves, we are the guest. Welcome to the party. Yes. We come and go. The host remains. The host is the unborn, undying, remains. The questioner, the guest, is in the form of the ego, and he meets the answerer, who is in the form of the self, of the true self. Okay? That's the first thing, the first principle. That's a nice beginning. And then we come to the thing of the host sees the guest. This is not so simple. No? This means that the questioner is in the form of the true self, and he meets the answerer, who is in the form of the ego self. There's been a switch. One is suddenly the self looking at the ego, instead of the ego looking at the self. And then we come to this Chu Chen Chu, which is the host sees the host. The self sees the self. Truth sees truth. Then we come to the last stage of Pen Chin Pen, which is the guest sees the guest. That means that both the questioner and the answerer are in the form of the ego. Now, these are the four positions of questioning and answering. The four processes of liberation from subjectivity and objectivity. Now, in Rinzai Zen, very often we will hear something about the teacher slapping the student or hitting him with the stick. You get a stick and, what is this? You call it a stick and I'll give you 30 blows. You don't call it a stick, I'll give you 30 blows. What is it? Yeah. So then comes this, in the middle of something very quiet, or the student, the teacher has asked the student a question, and the student is trying to formulate things in his mind, and all of a sudden that teacher says, "Ha!" Or just maybe, like Rinzai used the phrase, "Quiet!" And this sudden yell. Evidently Obako used it, and Huang Po used it, and so Rinzai picked it up, and it's used today. After all, we are still aping or mimicking or whatever. The koan, this problem with which we work, I mean the question which you are given to work with, or the statement, it can be a very simple statement, such as, the plum blossom floats in the air. Now, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Or the frog jumps into the pond, plop. Great koan, you know. But boy, you know, and all the koan, it's really interesting. They liberate us from our unseen entanglements. They free us. And this is the use, one of the purposes of the koan, these problems, is to free us from both our seen and unseen entanglements. Yeah? Now, it opens the mind to liberation. And this involves these 4 steps having to do with object and subject. So first, we come to this. Take away the man, but not his objective situation. This is a Chinese way of putting it. Tu jian pu tu qing. Take away the man, but not his objective situation. That is to be free of the entanglements of subjectivity, but to let the objectivity remain. Everything is object, no subject. And there was a master out of the Rinzai sect a long time ago. His name was Fen Yang, and he wrote a little poem. Under the moonlight are the towers and the chambers of 1,000 houses. Lying in the autumn air are lakes and rivers of myriad li, almost a mile in measurement. Blossoms blow in the reeds, differing not in their colors. A white bird descends the white sandbank of a stream. In that whole poem, there's no mention of a subject. He never says, I see or I hear. It is sheer objectivity. It is object. When one is freed from subject, objectivity only remains. To take away the man, but not his objective situation. I hope that some of you have been trying at least to look at what is subject within yourself. Now, then we come to the next one, is take away the objective situation, but not the man. To be free from the attachments of objectivity, but let subjectivity remain, so that all is subject. Non-attachment to objectivity liberates one from the bondage from all the outer, and it leads to enlightenment. And then we have to take away both the man and his objective situation. Oh, what's left? You take away your objective situation and you take away the man, the subjectivity. What's left? Well, liberation from both subject and object, naturally. But man alive, it's what you're looking for. It sure is. You know, there was a little monk, and his name was Ting, and he came to his master, who was Lin Chi, and he stood there in front of him, and he asked him, what is the essence of Buddhism? What is the essence? It's like somebody would ask, what is the essence of Christianity? What is the essence? The master came down from his high seat and slapped his face and pushed him away. And Ting, this little monk questioner, he stood there. I mean, you know, like he was frozen. He didn't expect to be slapped. He expected an answer. He expected an explanation. Don't you? Yeah. So instead of that, he got a slap in the face. So there was another monk standing close by to him. He said, Ting, why don't you bow? And as the monk did this, he started to make this bow, and he suddenly saw. So this illustrates this use of the slapping and the pushing. which would be, insulting in our everyday circumstance. You ask somebody a question, they slapped your face or they yelled at you, oh, it's insulting. But when it's used in this Chinese Zen or Chan, by a teacher, it becomes a method of opening the mind. It is, if you watch your mind when you hear something like that, that sound, all of a sudden it goes, of course it comes right back together again, but there is that opening for that split second. And that frees us from bondage of this subject-object thing. Rinzai, when being asked this question, he could have gone on and on and on about what is the essence of Buddhism, But instead of trying to explain something which would have left this little ting exactly where he was before, there would have been no transformation. No? Instead of it, he just slapped him. Something opened. And in this little ting's response where he started to bow, there is no intellectualizing about essence or anything else. There is no reasoning out anything. There's nothing subjective, now I should do this and now I should do that. There's no help from all the traditional scriptures to add to his understanding. He was lost in a world where there was neither subject nor object. And he just stood there, frozen, not thinking, not feeling, not anything. Until all of a sudden, when he did start to bow, it was like a dam opened in him, and all these, like waters of enlightenment poured through him. Yeah. Freeing from subject-object. And then we come to this takeaway, neither the man nor the situation, and you let both the subject and the object be what they are. Of course, by now they're a little different than what they are now. And they are identified one with the other. So Rinzai used to say about this thing, and others have said it something like it, fellow learners, to achieve Buddhahood, there is no need for cultivation. Just carry on an ordinary task without any attachment. Wear your clothes, eat your meals. When you are tired, lie down. The fool will laugh at you, but the wise man will understand. Both subject-object again, but an identification one with the other, which is very different than what we have now. Now, to illustrate something like this, where there is this identification, this togetherness. When Chao Chu was looking for his enlightenment, he went by foot travel. And in China, the monks used to wander around the mountains looking for the masters who very often lived by themselves in little huts in these mountains. And in China, it used to be that you lived there after you received your ordination or whatever you want to call it, that you went into the mountains and lived for 2 years or 7 years, I've forgotten however it was, in isolation to further that and deepen it. And then when you came out from that, you were ready to teach. So the monks used to wander around in these mountains looking for these people. Yeah. And it came that this Chao Chu came upon Linchi, this Rinzai. And when he came upon him, Rinzai was sitting there by a little mountain stream and he was bathing his feet. And Chao Chu moved up quite close to him. And finally, being right next to him, he asked him, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming to the West? And Master Linchi looked at him, he says, you ask at a time when I am bathing my feet. So this Chao Chu moved a little closer and made a gesture, that maybe he was listening. And Master Rinpoche said to him, "Do you want a second ladle of dirty water poured on you?"
If you find Lola's talks valuable, more will be posted in weeks to come.